So, dear guests, if you're wondering why I switched to English, this is why we will have international guests on our next panel. And there we will take a closer look at the international view on autonomous and connected mobility, especially on the regulatory framework that is needed to reach the next level of intelligent mobility. So we discussed this further with the context of the German law, but now we will have a more international view on this, from blueprints to regular operations, an international view on autonomous and connected mobility. This is the title of our panel, and this is what we will discuss now. And I am very happy to welcome the following experts. So welcome to Richard Damm, who is the president of the Kraftfahrt-Bundesamt, or the Federal Motor Transport Authority in Germany, and he is also chairman of the UNECE Working Party on Automated and Autonomous and Connected Vehicles in Geneva. Hi, great to have you here.
Then, thank you. Pleasure.
We also welcome Jasmin Fasch. She is COO and co-founder of GoGo Network. And this is a startup which focuses on autonomous vehicle mobility, and it is working on developing the legal and engineering framework of the European Autonomous Mobility Network of the next decades. And she founded it roughly 1 year ago. So a warm welcome to you, Jasmin. Then we have Dr. Patrick Ayat, who is the global leader mobility and transportation of Hugo Lovells International. And Patrick advises numerous players in the mobility market on a wide range of legal issues, with a current focus on autonomous and connected mobility. Welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I would like to welcome Per Olof Arnes, who is the senior logistics strategist from Einride. And Einride is the first company in the world to test an electric and autonomous driving truck on public roads, and it's called the Pod. Welcome, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, so from blueprints to regular operations, this is the title, and I would like to ask you to give us an overview. Where do we stand? So let's start with you, Patrick, because I think you have a broad overview and you advise a lot of players in the market. So how much blueprint do we have at the moment, and how much regular operations?
We have these vehicles on the road for testing purposes for many years now, and basically everywhere. I think the big question and the next step is serial deployment. And a couple of years ago, we thought we would be, many years away from a regulatory framework. But I think we are getting there. We are getting there thanks to the work on the UN level. And I think Richard can tell us more about that as well. And the German level, of course. You were just talking about the new L4 law in Germany. But we also have significant progress, I think, on the EU level, which is particularly important for us here in the EU with the ADS draft, which is currently on the table. And, if things go well, we might have a regulatory framework also in Europe next year or so. We have something in Germany, we have something in France and some other countries that went ahead, basically. So I think the regulatory framework is now catching up, and serial deployment from a regulatory perspective is something that will come very soon.
Okay. You already addressed Richard, so I would like to ask him as well. So how much regular operations are there, and how much blueprint? So what is your point of view there?
Yeah, thank you first of all for allowing me to speak here during the Bitcoin Mobility event. So I think it's the point Patrick already mentioned. There are many activities on the way around the world. And you've mentioned the European market. I think France and Germany are going ahead. And this is not to protect the market, but this is just to accelerate the whole process on a European level. And our intention is to really take a lead in the global market in terms of automation and in terms of connectivity. And this needs, of course, some courage in drafting regulations. You've addressed the point of the balance between regulations and the flexibility that is needed. And that's what we're trying to achieve at the moment. Allowing the deployment, a fast deployment, but a safe deployment of the technology. That's most urgent. But this cannot be achieved by drafting only strict regulations. So we need to give flexibility, and this can be only done on a European stage and global stage. Thank you.
Per, you're nodding. So is there enough flexibility for your business model? Is there enough flexibility that you can test your pod on the street at the moment?
No. We are testing, we are working with the Swedish authorities at the moment and also the US authorities, where we are also want to run tests very soon. But what we see is that the legislative and the regulatory process and the process of creating new policies is actually belonging more to the last century than the coming one. It's more of a descriptive. We have to describe every case and find all the corner cases before we can at least allow one test. And we think that we need to take a more risk-based approach and put demands on us as innovators to say that, okay, can you solve this risk situation? Can your technology solve that you don't have a driver in the vehicle, for instance? The driver will be a few miles away sitting by a remote station. If we can convince the authorities that can be solved with a reasonable degree of safety, then we should be able to try it. But the approach that is so common today is that you create a regulatory framework and then we have to adapt to that. And the regulatory framework today implicitly implies that there is a driver in each vehicle, even if the vehicle is autonomous. And we don't even have a driver cabin in our vehicles. So for us, we always need to seek exemptions and find these creative paths through. So we would need a little bit more of entrepreneurship when it comes to policy creation. That's our main message.
Yes, I mean, you are working on the legal framework and also in the engineering framework. So your aim is to develop a framework which is more flexible.
Maybe, I'm sorry who introduced GoGo, and I just want to clarify. We are like operating autonomous vehicles, and on parallel, because as my colleague here just mentioned, there is so much work to be done. We are contributing to the co-creation with government at the EU level and at the country level. But our objective is never to be the creator of this. We're just suggesting a couple of, thoughts as part of, like, let's say, brainstorming between people that are a bit more on the ground. But we're operating like autonomous delivery robots for packages and cargo. We have a partnership on, autonomous shuttles as well with another transport authority. And I think to this point, it's very hard, I think it's a chicken and egg. We cannot just expect regulator to do it from their tower there and then, that it would magically solve all our issues. And we cannot just complain and say they would, so I think we need to work together. So that's why we're doing this. And I think we should also distinguish two things in terms of regulation. There's one thing which is the technical regulation. So what are all the safety standards? What are all the critical elements that make, your vehicle safe in a specific area? But what also we're trying to work on and explain to the government that, there's also like commercial regulation that needs to happen if we don't want to basically only have the opportunity to do small pilots that have zero business model forever. And then to just, at the end of the day, if there is no commercial framework, it's going to be like, the jungle where like the most advanced players from different horizon. And honestly, unfortunately, in Europe, we're not leading as Waymo and so on in other, because we didn't had so much investment. And it's understanding how can you create a also legal framework that, empowers also European champions and give them like a market where they could develop a business model at scale, attract investment and so on, because that's what's happening also for us in Europe. We have been able to attract so much investment in this space compared to like what's happening in the US or in Asia.
Thanks for clarification. I think it was a little bit lost in translation there. So of course you're operating, but I think you're also interested in a regulatory framework, which is beneficial for your business model, but also for the whole case. So thanks again for clarification there. So I would like, given timing, I would like to talk about the point European solutions versus national solutions, because we already talked about the German level 4 rule. We talked about that there are also efforts in Luxembourg, in the Netherlands, for example. And of course, there's also the need for harmonization. And I would like to understand a little bit better what the importance is of international or at least European harmonization, and where is it beneficial to have some national rules? So where do we have to distinct between them, and what party can do what better at that? So maybe, I think you have all the opinion for this, but maybe Patrick, if you would like to start, I'm very interested in your opinion there.
Yeah, I mean, and it is a bit complex because there are several layers. There's, of course, the UN level, and we have the UN conventions, Geneva and Vienna, and there needed to be some changes here as well. And there's still a lot of work going on, and I guess Richard can talk about this as well. But then, particularly when we talk about Europe, we have a European legal framework for the registration or approval of cars, actually, and then registration is done locally. So we need the type approval framework that needs to be there for those vehicles to be on the market. And I think, and everyone agrees, we need a flexible approach here. We need something, and we just issued a white paper on the road to autonomous vehicles, which also advocates a flexible approach. Because there can be so many players that come into the market, and we have some players here in this round, which is also why I think we should be careful in regulating the commercial side, to be honest, because there is competition out there, and this will work it out. The most important point at the moment to get the technology on the streets is the safety of these vehicles and the assumption of regulatory responsibility. And whoever assumes the regulatory responsibility and can also prove a safety concept, which will then be reviewed by the authorities, in Germany, for example, KBA, together with the technical service, should be able to bring these vehicles on the market. And for this, we need the regulatory framework. And it can be the automotive manufacturer, who are currently, I think, struggling with the semiconductor crisis and also electrification, but it could also be a supplier who is working in that area, or the new entrants. And we have one, at least here, with a pretty impressive truck. I mean, I just recommend everyone to have a look at this pretty impressive truck, which probably, and I wanted to make that point, Per-Olof, scares a little bit the regulators if they see that. But so I can understand what you said. It's not just a normal vehicle. It's pretty impressive and advanced, and I think we need to allow everyone to assume this responsibility and get their products on the market. And maybe I pause here and let others to add.
Yes, I would agree to this. So, Yasmin, I see you were nodding, but feel free to answer to add something to the question why we need harmonization and where it is possible and where it is needful.
No, but I think it goes back to the same point. At the end of the day, when you look at development of the space in other regions of the world, what is a bit scary and depressing about Europe is that it's at the local level of a city, right? And you have you have local regulation on top of everything. And when you're trying to do a pilot, an experimentation, it's every city is different, and it's kind of the resources that are required to actually, launch something. You realize that what would help us as operators is to have markets that make sense, right? That have a certain scale. It's if you talk in the past to a telecom operator that put antenna everywhere and then suddenly has a network in the whole country, and you say, no, you're just going to do first this area and put your antenna there, and then this area, and each time bid for a license to operate. I think if we are not able to get some scale, it's going to be very hard to create to really get to transformation and bring the product to market, because it will only be sprinkling innovation and showcases, but never real use case that actually are solving the way people move or the way packages move. And the work is getting more global, so we have to adapt to that.
You said you need market that makes sense, and I think that's a very, very good picture at the end. Richard, so you are operating in both. So you're working for the Federal Motor Transport Authority, but also for the UNECE. So how do you ensure, and what are your efforts to create these markets that make sense, to phrase Jasmine there?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm chairing the autonomous and connected driving working group at the UNEC, the WP29. The WP29 is the World Forum for the Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations. So what we are dealing is a global harmonization of such regulations. And I think it's of utmost importance to do it at a very early stage, and that's what we are trying. I think we are all facing the same challenges in the different countries around the world with regard to automation and connectivity. And I think it is key that we are trying to address some basic requirements and define basic provisions. For example, what is an ODD? For example, what are functional safety elements and how is such safety assessed? Because if you go to the US or to Europe or to Asia, I think you have to have such definition that you need for the implementation of a technology. And that's very important that we have the same definition. We are now starting on the point, does an autonomous vehicle need some light signaling devices for other road users, for example? And it's, of course, in Germany, we would call it a super GAU. So a very worst case, if you would have I just say blue flashing light in the US and a green light in China and a white one or a red one in Europe. So that's what we are trying to address, very basic findings at this stage. I think we are not at the point to regulate it fully, but to draft guidelines that we try to publish next year, so that the different regions and countries around the world can make use of such basic definitions and basic requirements. And just two last sentences regarding Per Olof. I think we had a similar situation in Germany about the testing areas, where you had to go to the city, to the local authorities to get the approval. And that's what we are trying to centralize at KBA, to get from a central point an approval, and you can test in the whole country of Germany the different products you would like to test. You just have to prove the safety concept for your vehicle. And that's the new approach we are taking. Thank you very much.
And that's really good. I want to say that's like Europe should look at that and like implement that approach in all the other countries, because that's just alleviate a huge burden and makes, just the operations much more streamlined.
So this was a little bit of advertising for driving tests in Germany, Per Olof. But you just announced that you also started testing in the US. So what was your reason to go for this location instead of, for example, going to Germany?
I mean, we go where our customers are, and we have global customers. So we now are rolling out with General Electric appliances in the US, and they were first there. But going back to looking at the international level, and we would like to put faith in the UNEC at NRIDE, because we think we need international sort of basic guidelines that will take care of all the boilerplates that will be needed. But what concerns us is that these type of actors that I represent, that are building the future now, and we are moving very much faster than the OEMs and the incumbent industry, we have not been invited to the table to give our views. Most of the companies that are asked are the incumbents and the industry that preferably would think that we should move a bit slower so that they can keep up. And I mean, we are 5 years old, and 2 years ago we were first on the planet to go on public roads autonomously with the heavy freight vehicle in Sweden. For us, 6 months is a very long time. So please ask us. We want to be able to be responsible and take responsibility for our future direction, because we are working both with autonomy but also electrification. Both of these need to take the lead together. The worst case is when we automate diesel vehicles, because then we will lower the operating cost for diesel, and then we will have even more carbon footprint from the transportation sector than the 7 to 8% that we have today. And if you ask the OEMs, I'm not sure you will get that answer. You will probably get other things that they see more important. So we would like a seat at the table, companies like us.
Okay. Is it something that you also experience, Patrick, because you advise a lot of different parties there? So is it something that the 2 points I think Per-Olof made, that the speed is some kind of too fast for the regulations, but also that they are not the right parties who are invited to the table to set up a good framework?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, the automotive industry is so established with established players, and there are new entrants coming in now for years. It's not just for the last 1 or 2 years. I mean, so this changes the game. And yes, we can see that there may be difficulties for a new entrant to be on the table when these laws are discussed or drafted or regulations. There are consultations, stakeholder consultations, for example. I think the UK is quite good at it, I have to say, because through the Law Commission, they allow stakeholders to contribute and they take that very seriously. But there are ways to get involved. I mean, get in touch with the regulators if you think that you have a point, if you have a business model, if you want to test something. I mean, you know, we work very on a regular basis with also as lawyers, with the regulators, with the authorities, and we question them, you know, whatever things, and we get a response. So it is possible to get engaged with the regulators and authorities on that. But of course, it's more difficult, and Richard will certainly add to this. This is very good. And I mean, you know, innovation always calls for flexibility, and I think this is important, and also for speed. We are getting there, but maybe not quick enough as Per-Olof and other players, new players, would like to, I understand. Richard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly. So I think I was not advertising for Einride to come to Germany, but it's quite clear. Just testing in Sweden, or just testing in Germany, or just testing in France or somewhere else in Europe is not sufficient. You need to collect the experience of testing in different countries, because countries are different. So the way of driving is different, the infrastructure is different. So the more information you have, the better it is to develop a safe technology. Coming to the contribution to the national, European and international activities. I think from a national point of view, and I can only speak for Germany now, it's quite clear that we are doing our hearings when we are publishing a law, and companies have the chance to contribute and also directly contact the government, the different ministries in mentioning what the needs are and so on. On the European level, we have the so-called Motor Vehicle Working Group, the MVWG, and it is open for public. So if delegations, if companies would like to contribute to the discussion, it's possible. And on an international level, at the UNEC, it's also open. It's a public meeting. So you just have to register at the UNEC as a non-governmental organization, and then it has to be decided whether you get a guest status or whether you can participate as part of a delegation of an association. So I can only make the point that you are able to participate, and you're very much welcome, because we need the input. Thank you.
We will.
Okay, so the invitation is Per-Olof will take it. Yasmin, what do you think? So is this enough to have this invitation and to know, okay, you can be part of it, or do you think there are other things we should foster, which should be more precise and more fast in, or we should enable other players to play a bigger role in setting up new regulations, like startups and like new mobility players?
Yeah, so I think Patrick summed it up, but I think there is something about like being proactive and being reactive in the regulation, and in Europe a lot of time, and I see Richard is saying that we need to do it faster, and I appreciate that, but I feel like compared to the US, when they always regulate a posteriori and they just let more, we always want, because also like it's our like more European way of thinking, we want to make sure, you know, everything is so true and structured, and I think we need to understand that like if we continue with this mental construct, we are at the risk of losing another huge industry for Europe. We've been losing almost, let's say, and I don't want to be like pessimistic, but we a bit like the internet revolution, the big tech player are not like European. We've been losing like, you know, the retail with Amazon is still not European. And now we've always been champion in mobility, right, in Europe. And now this is a moment where we can be totally disrupted and lose this industry if we're not able to move fast and create the incentive and the legal framework for this industry to prosper and to grow fast in Europe, but also to make sure that company like Einride, GoGo, and so on can also play a role in this space. Because like if you go to China, I can tell you that the government is really focused on this industry and it is really focused on promoting their champions. So I'm not talking about protectionism, but we just need to be also smart about how we want Europe to continue to be a leader in this industry, on top of being able to actually offer this service to users. I think there are two questions here that need two different set of regulation. And for sure, like, we need to be part of the conversation. OEMs need to be part of the conversation. Startups need to be part of the conversation. Telecom operator needs to be part of the conversation. Public transport operator needs to be part of it. And we need to, and it's the hard part of this, is that, I don't know, I think maybe in Ireland is the same, but we are part like of, I don't know how many working groups. Like we cannot even count the number of working groups that are like asking for input, but it's so fragmented that even that is right now not working, I would say, in the optimal format. And I'm not, I mean, it's easy to say the problems, it's harder to find the solution, but I think it's clear is that they need to be at the top level of like country and European level, a willingness to crack this problem fast and to realize that like we are very good at regulating monopoly a posteriori, but like if we don't do anything, we can have just one player that will come one day that will fit all the technical standard and will just wipe up the market like Amazon did, like Google did, and so on, just because they have been able to just have much more investment from 10 years ago, right? As you said, Einride is 5 years ago. I think Waymo has been working this for 12 years, and you cannot compare the level of technology. So yeah, that's for me.
But can I just add? I mean, I think we really need all players. We also need the big ones. And
yeah, we need them too. Totally, we need to share the like. What we need is not to be wiped out, because when you look at France, for instance, and we're so proud to have like Easy Mile and Navia that have raised each, I don't know, 30 million, 40 million. And when you look at what those giants are spending, it's like they're jokes. It's like what they're spending per month, and they've been spending that for. And they're like operating in many states in the US, collecting data, learning, and so on. And here, every time you want to do a small deployment, it's like 6 months process. And as Richard, we don't have 6 months, and we don't have infinite resources, because also at the end of the day, it's like the more complex it is for us to try and operate, we lose money, and the hardest it is already for European to attract investment, because they see that like any way to scale things, it's so complicated. So you don't, it's like a lose-lose setup for European startup. If I can explain I don't know if it was clear, the message, but like you will never attract like the biggest investor if they don't see a path to like a profitability business model, like scale deployment, not just pilot. And for us also, it's like, it's hard to keep the focus and the energy and so on if we have to sprinkle our like effort, and just multiply it every time we go to a new city.
Yeah, I think just to add, at the end of the day, it is important to get the best solutions on the market, the best technology, and competition. I truly believe, or strongly believe, that competition will work it out. You need to have the best offerings for the market. You need to have a cool product. You need to have a technologically most advanced product, and then you'll be successful. It's maybe not that easy, but it's not easy for everyone at the moment when we talk about the future.
No, but Patrick, I'm so pro competition, and I'm pro different players for different for the users. But what you see is that right now, we haven't been able to compete in the internet space. We haven't not been able to compete in the retail space. And if we continue like that, we won't be able to compete because it's not just mobility, like it's a new level of data and so on. And like to do that, you need huge capital investment. And all the startups that we have right now, if you just sum all the investment that they've been able to deploy in this space, and we've done the analysis, you don't even get to like, the shoe of like the big players. And so, yes, you can say, look, I don't care. We just get like the biggest players. So you just accept that also Europe is going to lose this market.
So, Patrick, I would like to give you the opportunity just to answer, but then given timing, I would like to...
That's fine. I'll just leave it as is.
Okay, and I have to admit, I like it if the discussion spice up a bit. I just have a look at the clock, and I see we only have 5 minutes left. But I really enjoy that you're interacting and you're discussing, because I think that's important to find a good framework and to discuss things and to disagree and to agree. So I like this very much. But given timing, I would like to make a closing round, and I would. So we talked a little bit about the regulatory framework. We talked about flexibility. We talked about security and the in between. And I would ask all of you, starting with let's say Per Olaf, then Patrick, then Jasmin, and then Richard. I would like to ask you, if we meet again at let's say the mobility conference in 5 years. So what needs to be done until then? What has to be done so that you would say, okay, we can call it a success. The international regulatory framework is successful, and maybe also that Per Olaf won't go to the US, but he will do the next tests in Europe. And I would be very happy if you could give me a short answer, because we only have 3 minutes left. And Per Olaf, now it's up to you.
Jasmin told the most important parts. Europe needs to be able to compete with Asia and the US, and we are not able to do that now. All the foundational technologies are found there. The experts are found there. So we are a little bit strange, our company, that we have grown up in Sweden. But looking forward, and what would be a true challenge, and I think what's needed, is we need to rewrite the legislations for the next century. We need to look at electricity first and autonomy first. If I want to transport dangerous goods with an autonomous vehicle today, and I'm talking a can of hairspray, there is no case available to do that without the driver in the vehicle. It doesn't even exist. So if you want to change that, it will be at least a 5-year bureaucratic process. It's a nightmare. We need to do Control-Alt-Delete on the legislations and look towards the future, not patch the old stuff. That's my main message.
Very clear.
We'll help you with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Patrick, what do you think? What needs to be done that we can call it a success in the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think we will have that in 5 years.
That's
the
good.
Regulatory framework on the international and European level. And I assume Richard is working on this very hard to achieve it, and we're trying to contribute as well. And I also strongly believe in cooperations and partnerships and also alliances when it comes to these developments. One example is the Catena X, which was actually an initiative in Germany, pushed, I think, even by the government to regulate or to find some cooperation on the data sharing side when it comes to the automotive network. All the major players and the national players, and now also it goes beyond Germany, are part of this Catena X network. And I think this is exactly the kind of collaboration and cooperation and alliance that we need to make that happen. So, my point is really to bring all stakeholders together, the small ones, the big ones, the national ones, the European ones, and even the Chinese and US ones.
All right, Jasmin, what is your point there? When would you say there is a regulatory success?
I mean, for me, regulatory is really a means to an end. So I think having the regulation and so on, for me, the success would be that if we look at in 5 years and we have, out of, the top 10 mobility players in the world, we have at least three that are Europeans. That would be a success for me. And that we have been able to, also have a real service to users and not just, a great framework that I know that we can do. We are very good in Europe at doing regulation. That's but now we need to make sure actually we are doing the regulation in a way, not just to ensure safety, but to ensure commercial success and making sure we keep a strong leadership in this sector in the world. And I agree with the Alt-Delete. I think the autonomous mobility is a totally different industry. So you cannot just try to amend all the, Transportation Act that we have in Europe, because you're touching, suddenly we're creating, it's a new industry. that is like that's why there's no ministry of autonomous driving. And when you're trying, to always think about those laws with the government, it's always between innovation, transportation, telecom, and it's like going all around. And I think that's really the proof that we need to think from scratch again.
Okay, and then the closing statement to Richard. So what would you say, when is it a success if we do this work from scratch now and looking back 5 years in the future? When could you lay back and say, wow, that was a good one and I'm happy now?
Yeah, that's a big statement to lay back. No, I think it would be good if we would see from the policy side the courage for the next years to allow the deployment of the technology. So to give opportunities to the stakeholders here around the table and in the audience, of course, and to see the deployment in a safe manner. I think that's important. So, and that's only possible not only with regulations, but giving manufacturers a certain responsibility as well. And that's why we need the dialogue. It's not as we did it in the past, drafting a regulation, we are checking it, and then it's done, and the product comes on the market. So it's like a relationship of the product, the manufacturer, and the regulator over a lifetime of the vehicle. And that would be an achievement if we could follow this way during the next years, on national and international level.
I saw a lot of nodding, and I think that's always a good sign that the statement was a good one for the final statement. So thank you a lot for the lively discussion. I wish we had more time because it was really, really interesting to know more about your views, to say your views on the international views and regulation on autonomous and connected mobility. So thank you for being here. Richard Damm from the Kraftfahrt-Bundesamt, Jasmin Fasch from GoGo Network, Per-Olaf Arnes from Einride, and Dr. Patrick Ayat from Hogan Lovells International. Thanks for being part of the Mobility Conference and for the discussion.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.